What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel, Morgan Allena True Crime and Mystery. Today I want to talk about Gypsy Rose Blanchard and how she was basically Rod and Kristy's dirty little secret for almost her entire existence. Meaning they did not tell actually close with them or knew them. Even friends with a person for 30 years, they had never heard of Gypsy Rose until the fateful night where they took Dede's life. Obviously, we know that's not the case now because Rod and Kristy have placed themselves front and center, pretty much defending Gypsy at every possible point or turn, going on multiple documentaries in order to defend Gypsy and say how they were trying to be the perfect parents that they could be for Gypsy, but it was all Dede's fault and they had no other ways to get into Gypsy's life. I want to talk about why that's not even true, and maybe the possible reasons as to why they wanted to lie about it. What those friends of Rod and Kristy Blanchard have said in the past about Gypsy and what they felt whenever they found out that they actually had another daughter, let alone two other daughters, which Rod has also not really mentioned until it actually came out. But I want to get into that and maybe discuss some of the motives they had for doing it. Before we move on to that, I want to remind you guys, if you haven't already, please hit the like button, and if you're not subscribed to my channel yet and you want to do that, I would really appreciate it. Thank you to all of my subscribers that have been viewing my videos and commenting and boosting them. My subscribers that gave me a super thanks, those are so very kind and I really appreciate it every single time that you guys do that. And I want to give a very, very special shout out of appreciation to Jenny Kaysen 693. Thank you very much, Jenny. Every one of you guys that watch my videos and support me in any way that you can, it really means a lot. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into why Rod and Kristy hid this part of their life away from everyone they knew. Clearly, we know that Gypsy Rose Blanchard has all the motives to need to lie when she's telling her story about how Clauddine Blanchard was murdered and what part she actually played in this crime. But it's interesting to me that Rod and Kristy Blanchard have continued to not only perpetuate the lies that Gypsy tells, they also add their own spins on stories in order to paint themselves in a better light too. So it seems that Clauddine Blanchard is not the only, quote, scammer in this story. Gypsy Rose Blanchard and Rod and Kristy have continued to add on to these stories, perpetuating the lies even about the most simple bits of information. So for example, in Gypsy Rose Blanchard's book, she claimed that Dede and Rod were divorced in 1992. This is not true. They were divorced in 1994. Such a simple thing to lie about. So why lie about it? Why throw in all of these strange little things to, I guess it's really to take the focus off of other parts, to fit in better with Rod's story about why he actually left Dede when she was pregnant and he was out and about doing all sorts of things. But if we go back and look at what Rod was really doing whenever he was actually with Dede, Kristy as well, because Rod and Kristy were very much together before Dede and Rod ever divorced. Even prior, according to some, before Dede and Rod ever met or were married, Rod and Kristy were dating. They don't ever tell the story in that way. They always want to make it out to be that they were just really good friends from school, and one thing led to another years down the road, and then they were married, which doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Probably because Kristy doesn't want to actually be painted as the, quote, homewrecker or somebody that would break up a marriage of a woman that has a newly very, very sick child. I mean, yeah, understandable. Nobody really wants to be in that position. And I'm not even here to judge necessarily about that. I want to go through and read a couple of the posts that were made on Facebook by Kristy Blanchard or some of the people that have known Rod and Kristy throughout the years, and how surprised that they actually were to find out that Rod even had another child, and this was way before the other daughter, Nicolette, was even discovered. He never mentioned her either. Even in various newspaper articles and stuff like that, he never brought up that he had another daughter aside from Mia or Gypsy. kind of weird, isn't it? Which is kind of funny because Rod always likes to tell the story of how him and Dede actually met, and said that Dede tried to pretend that she was younger than what she actually was, and Rod was 17 years old in a bar, and he bought Dede a drink. So I mean, they were both kind of lying about their ages at that point, but basically to make it like he's just too young, he made a mistake, which that is pretty young to get married. That's true. But that doesn't excuse anything, because Rod also was dating a younger woman and got her pregnant, and that would be Nicolette's mother. She was younger than 17 whenever they were hooking up. And she actually ended up getting pregnant, having the baby at the age of 17. But they don't want to talk about that, right? I mean, obviously it's very easy to just pretty much conclude that it's financially motivated now. But what was the motivation back then? Why would you hide another child? What's the reason? And I mean, I know it's not something you just go out and announcing to every single person that you meet that you have another child from a previous marriage and she's disabled and blah, blah, blah. I don't expect that. But for people that said that they knew them for years, never heard one single thing about this other child, I gotta wonder if that actually just really irks a Gypsy when she hears that. Because, I always say that I believe this all really linked back to not having Rod in her life, and she was really, really desperate to get back into his life, even if she had to literally force her way back into Rod's life by killing her own mother. That's what I believe the true motive was. I think she was jealous that Rod left Gypsy and her mother and didn't understand it, and so she pretty much just placed the blame on her mom. And you can kind of tell just by the way that when she's even talking in her book about how devastated Dede was about losing Rod. Well, yeah, that's a devastating thing to lose a marriage. But the way Gypsy makes it sound as if it's like a personal failure, I don't know that Dede would feel that way. I think she would feel, upset about it and probably heartbroken over it, but to feel like just the way that Gypsy made it sound doesn't seem right to me. Because at the same time, Dede was also telling people that Rod abused substances. He was an alcoholic. He was mean to Gypsy, which, that's not even very surprising. And I'm not even judging him for the substance issue if he had a problem with it back then. But alcohol in particular, that will change who you are as a person. And you can get really agitated when you're on substances. So throw in a crying baby, it's really not a far-fetched statement. He probably didn't like it if Gypsy was like a fussy baby, which she probably was. And especially men kind of stress out a little bit more whenever you're hearing a baby crying all the time. Not all the time, but just in some cases. And it wouldn't surprise me if Rod was one of them. I think Dede actually just dealt with feelings of being abandoned, because that's kind of what really happened. He abandoned the marriage, and whether that was the choice that he had to make for himself at that time, probably he was very young and very immature and acting like a lot of people, especially in the country, do. A lot of kids act like that. I mean, he wasn't a kid, he was almost an adult, but still, they say that the male brain ages later than what the female brain does, so it's not surprising that Rod was very immature. So I think Gypsy was the one that kind of put these pieces together, which, obviously she has a history of doing that. So for example, whenever she said Ken loves Barbies, she wanted him, or he wanted her to be a Barbie to his Ken, because he dated a blonde girl and he likes blondes better, and she'll never be the right blonde bimbo type of person that he wants. And he literally said, I never said anything like that. There's never been one time where I ever insinuated that I wanted you as a blonde. I preferred blondes. None of it. You just made that up in your own mind. Which people do that all the time. It's not even just a Gypsy in particular thing. People can get their minds going and they start forming pieces together about things, and then that's how they form their own view of things, whether it's correct or incorrect. So I think Gypsy viewed it as Dede couldn't keep her man because of who she is, and that will never be me. But, obviously Gypsy kind of is following her mother's footsteps a little bit, at least with how Kristy claims that Dede purposefully got pregnant by checking out a book, How to Get Pregnant, which seems ridiculous to me. A good majority of people know how to get pregnant. Unless Dede was also struggling with fertility issues like Gypsy, right? Yeah, we won't mention that. In a private Facebook group, Kristy Blanchard wrote, "First, I would like to thank you for allowing me in. I want you all to know this has been very hard on our family, and I hope to God this never happens to any of you, because y'all will be saying to everyone what I'm about to say. Every single one of you. I'm tired of the slander, the cyberbullying, posting photos of my 14-year-old daughter and my son. All of you are so quick to judge us without knowing all of the details of what we went through with Dede, and yet y'all think we are lying when we said we had no clue what she was doing. We were paying child support up until that day. Dede died because we thought Gypsy's needs were around-the-clock care. Yes, some of you tend to believe that I knew she could walk. My brain was going faster than I could text, and a friend seen her when she was little at a furniture store and jumping on beds, and she called me saying what she had seen. When Dede saw that my friend was there, she immediately went and put Gypsy and grabbed her and put her up in her arms. I have never seen Gypsy walk until the court appearance on the internet in Wisconsin. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and that I was seeing her walk. I was so happy, but yet so sad under the circumstances. I've had enough of the bashing and talking bad about us. We are not allowed to defend ourselves. I can't tell you how many screenshots I've got from strangers I don't know that send me what you and the other groups are saying. I've screenshot them all, and I'll be turning them over to my lawyer and the police station, and we will have all of y'all who slander our names to take action, especially of my 14-year-old daughter, whom y'all think is 18. If y'all would know both sides of the story, I think y'all would not be saying all what y'all are saying about us. But I don't really owe y'all anything, because y'all assume y'all know it all. I'm sure after this post y'all will start bashing, but ask yourself this: if it were y'all in my shoes, would y'all allow people to be spreading lies about you and your family? I think not. Enough is enough. Do I condone what Gypsy did? Not in the least. That I do agree with y'all on that. And that story that Kristy was saying about the furniture is in response to when she had posted in this other group. Lots of you are wanting to know if Rod and I knew she was scamming people, or if Gypsy was that ill. Gypsy was a sick child since birth. So here they're admitting they knew that Gypsy was a sick child. Over the years, we've heard stories of some things that Dede had done to make her more sick. It was hard to believe that she would do this to her child. So not only did they know that Gypsy actually was sick, but then they also heard that Dede was making her more sick and still did not intervene within the relationship, and just really thought that Dede was still a stand-up mother. So there's 3 different versions of things that they're giving and putting forward. My husband and I kept in constant touch whenever they moved to Missouri. We attempted to try and go see many times, but Dede always gave us the runaround. Did I know she could walk? Yes. Did I know they were scamming people? No. I only know what Dede and I discussed over the years. So this right here, where Kristy admits that she knew Gypsy could walk, which is, a lot of them knew that she could walk because Gypsy would get up and walk. Dede has never been really reported to have been saying, like, Gypsy, get back in your chair. What are you doing? You know, like snapping at her, trying to get her to behave. Had Gypsy tried to get up? No, there's, reports of Gypsy going out and playing with friends or family and cousins, eating her food and getting out of the chair, doing all these things. I was swimming with the dolphins at Disney World or whatever. Yes, swimming. But which is it? Did they know that Gypsy was a sick child and they really believed Dede was taking care of Gypsy to the best of her ability? Did they hear things throughout the years about Dede being a scammer and making Gypsy sicker than what she actually was? Or did they just let them do their own thing as long as they weren't bothering them? They were probably totally okay with Dede scamming where she needed to get what she needed for her kid, because that would mean that Rod wouldn't have to provide it and take away from their family. Right? If you want to know my opinion, I believe that Rod and Kristy were completely aware that Dede was likely scamming things to get what she needed for Gypsy. And I don't believe that they didn't know, in the same way that I don't believe that Gypsy didn't know either. She was well aware that she was getting stuff for being sick. Did she really just think that she was just such an inspirational child that people just wanted to throw money and gifts at her? I don't think so. She kept up the performance. She knew what she was doing. She spoke to the doctors herself. She spoke to social workers herself. She completely knew. Period. All the nonsense about how Gypsy said that whenever Rod would call, Dede would be standing right there, not letting her talk, or Dede would tell Rod that Gypsy doesn't know her birthday and she thinks she's 14 now. You know, maybe she was just telling Rod that, like, hey, I'm telling people that she's 14 so that way I can keep on the benefits. And he was probably like, yeah, bet, good idea. Very good idea. That's a good one. She looks pretty young. Because if you're a parent, you're hearing that, you would typically just be like, what? How did that happen? What do you mean she doesn't know? Does she still have other memories? Like, what do you mean she just doesn't understand that she all of a sudden is turning 18? I sincerely don't believe that. Like, why would you not even question it? Unless he really just thought that Gypsy was just so mentally delayed. Because, I mean, clearly there are moments whenever Gypsy was around Rod and Kristy, so that doesn't even make sense to me. She would have been acting probably how she did around other people, around doctors. They always would make comments about her vocabulary and how she had a really expansive vocabulary and able to speak and say certain words and really understand what the words meant. It's not like, you know, when a kid is saying something totally random and they don't have any idea what it means. She was cognitively aware. She may not have been able to do like math above a certain grade level or whatever, but there's not any sort of anything that said that she was really able to appear in a way that was like a 7-year-old. Majority of the doctors would say that she seemed totally okay. I mean, probably a little delayed in the fact that she was just dressed like a princess all the time and carrying around dolls. So, I mean, typically they would probably be like, yeah, there's probably something a little bit wrong there, but it's not so severely delayed intellectually. I mean, clearly they're right there. And as a matter of fact, on Gypsy Rose Blanchard's Facebook profile, or the one of many that she actually made, and if you've not watched my video about how literally Gypsy was in control of every single one of those accounts, despite what she tries to let on, that Dede was in control of them, except for like 2 or 3 secret ones. This was one of her personal accounts that she was actually friends with Rod Blanchard and Kristy Blanchard. They were friends on Facebook on multiple profiles. So not only on the Snow Gypsy account, but also on the Gyp Facebook account. Obviously, I always say that it was always Gypsy communicating back and forth, pretending to be her mom in order to get some sort of information or response from her dad, because that was really what irked her. And I think she was starting to get old enough to realize that, you know, maybe my dad doesn't actually want to be around me. Maybe it's not anything to do with mama. He's living his own life with his own family, and she did not like that. One user on Facebook wrote, the stepmom has said on here that Gypsy was sick, but not as sick as people believed, so that makes me think they knew. Heck, her friend used to post in here, and she knew it was a scam, but ignored it. My main issue with the dad and stepmom who claim to love Gypsy and have been kept away from her by Dede is that their own friends on Facebook made comments about not even knowing that Rod had another child. If that doesn't scream, I'm not a loving dad, then, you know. They probably also realized that Dede was getting Gypsy so many opportunities that they likely weren't going to be able to give her. So why would they interfere with the scamming? Obviously, Gypsy was benefiting from it. Another user wrote on Facebook, practically no one knew this was her stepdaughter. At least no one I knew did, including myself. And the minute that this went down, Kristy was stepmom of the year. But yet when I was still her friend on Facebook, I would go like everyone else and read her posts, and every single time Gypsy was referred to as Rod's daughter, she overlooked it, yet let someone mention food and she was all over it, I guess whenever it was something to do with like giving away free food or whatever. But people weren't ever bringing up Gypsy. And a lot of them just didn't even know that Gypsy even existed. This individual said, okay, so here's how it goes. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, but Dede took after her mom, who would be applauding the success and the extent of her scams. Dede and Rod hooked up after Dede lost all her weight. Who knows? It may have been her little red secondhand Miata car he was attracted to. She ended up pregnant. He and Kristy were on a break. Reading how they loved Dede made my stomach curl. They did nothing. Both shunned her and Gypsy. No, she was not at the vigil. If anyone down here was honest, we all know Dede left here because people were on to her lies. And someone wrote back to them, can I ask if you're a family member and how long have you known Dede? They said, I'm not a family member. I met Dede in grade school, 2nd grade here because of the area. We went to the same school until graduation, so yeah, I know the family. One of the groups that were discussing the case, it was said, were you aware that the night before Rod left Dede, he had been over at Kristy's mom's house getting advice from her as to what to do and say to Dede? He stayed half the night there talking with her according to Kristy. Shouldn't he have maybe spoken to his own family? Shouldn't Kristy's mom have sent him away and told him it wasn't appropriate for her to be giving him advice? No one is saying that Dede didn't have problems. That goes without saying. Her mom did too, from what Kristy and others have said. Kristy and Rod need to just stop their PR campaign and admit that they didn't do right by Gypsy and that things could have turned out much differently had they tried a little harder. They didn't do right by their daughter either. I knew Dede. I repaired Gypsy's power wheelchair. Gypsy was always asleep when I was there. I'm just curious, what do people actually know about them or have to say about them? I have read so much and my daughter did an in-depth report. You just never know what to believe. Dede was very disarming. She was very friendly. She would always make a big pot of jambalaya and show movies on the side of her house for the neighborhood kids. And it was also said that Rod, who ended up becoming incredibly intoxicated on the day that he was supposed to marry Dede at Kristy's house that night as well, and ended up being so drunk he crashed to the car into a ditch and got arrested and had to be bailed out of jail in order to make it to the wedding, which Kristy did not attend the wedding, but she did go to the bar afterward to have the reception, basically to party with Rod, which Dede would have been pregnant at the time, so. And throughout their relationship, they had wrote multiple letters back and forth talking about their relationship and how they wanted to be together. So it's either they were actually together prior or they were just messing around, which I think is probably very likely. I think Kristy was jealous of Dede. She may have had a crush on Rod, or maybe it just developed afterward. Who knows? And all of these examples are just a few out of so many other different individuals who have given their account about this whole entire case and actually knew Rod and Kristy. They didn't know about Gypsy. They never spoke of Gypsy. Gypsy was not really a concern. So it only makes sense that Rod later on would of course say that Dede kept Gypsy away from him. But also simultaneously, he had said in another documentary, obviously they've been in like 5, so it's like difficult to go back and find every single clip of every single different story that they've told. But in one of them, he had said that at that point, obviously he was working on the boat, which is a difficult job. So he's working offshore, and when they're doing that, they're gone for like weeks at a time. So you don't really have a whole lot of time to be spending with a family in a normal, stable kind of way, coming home every night. So he was too busy anyway, and he had enough going on with his own family, so he didn't really want to worry about Gypsy, and then combine all the other health issues. Yeah, he didn't want to deal with it. That's a lot to have a fully disabled daughter, and some people just really are not cut out for it. I don't think anybody would ever like wish for that to happen to anyone, but sometimes, you know, parents do have their children and they are unfortunately disabled, and some parents are really, really great, and they, you know, but I think deep down everybody would always just not want that for their kid. You know, that doesn't mean you dislike anything about the child, but you know, if you had it your way, they would be perfect and healthy and everything would be fine and they wouldn't have all these issues. That's a pretty typical feeling. And then you have Kristy going in there and saying, oh, well, she didn't want Rod and Dede to be together anyway, so she's pretty much the outsider because they had a relationship. So it makes sense that Kristy definitely wouldn't put any effort into maintaining a friendship with Dede. Even in another letter that Kristy had wrote to Fancy Maselli, I think it was, and it was basically saying how Kristy claimed that Dede would try to sabotage the relationship, and how even whenever Rod and Kristy were getting married, Dede was like making some big scene or telling somebody else that she planned to go up there and destroy the wedding or interfere in some way to get the wedding completely stopped because she was still she still had the marriage license, and that she called the Catholic priest or whatever saying that you can't marry them because been married, and I guess divorce is not really a good thing in the Catholic faith. I don't know too much about that, but so there's all these stories, and a lot of it comes from, oh, I had a friend that told me this, I had a friend that told me that. I think they just really didn't care enough to be checking on Gypsy, and they were embarrassed by her. Because, obviously they were cool with the scam part of it, but they were probably embarrassed by what it actually took to get there. Because, your children are a reflection of you and who you are. So maybe Rod had some sort of issue with the fact that he procreated and had a disabled daughter, was mentally delayed and acted really strange. He seems to be like a laid-back guy, and I know he doesn't ever claim to be a perfect dad or anything like that. But I think he wants to lessen the blow about it and try to act like he did attempt to be a part of the life of Gypsy Rose, and I don't think he did, because people would know. If he really cared about what Gypsy was doing, he would tell other people about her. He wouldn't hide her away. He wouldn't just not bring her up. It's like Gypsy's just a dark secret of his past. And the only reason why a person would ever really do that is because they're embarrassed, or they're ashamed, or they're hiding it because it was wrong, or perhaps they just wanted to maintain that Rod and Kristy got together and they had this perfect little family and there was no befores to mess up the little story that they wanted to portray. But I think they didn't care. Honestly, why would Rod be really upset about Dede scamming? That just lessens the load that he has to bear if he was even actually paying child support. I posted a video the other day, and at the end of a part of the clip, it was Rod basically saying he had paid Dede over $150,000 in child support. And he had continued to pay it well after Gypsy was over 18, which I've never really seen the documents. I know there's been claims that Dede actually had to go to court a couple times in order to get him to actually be paying the child support that she required. Because it's also a fact that whenever Rod and Dede got married, they were on a mortgage. And so whenever Rod left, she could no longer afford the mortgage, and it made them lose the house. She couldn't afford the mortgage. But then later on, it was said that Rod got her a rent house, but she lost the home in the first place because Rod decided to leave. So if we did the math on that, $150,000 divided by when Gypsy was 23 years old, and then break that down by the monthly payment, that would have been about $550 per month for 23 years. And then that doesn't include the fact that he threw in some extra medical expenses, which he was obviously aware that she was probably qualified for free insurance, and then disability. She was getting disability. So I don't really think that he was paying any medical bills, but just boosted that number up. And whenever Dede moved away, she probably wasn't as willing to go to court and try to enforce the child support payments. So is it possible that Rod was actually paying that $543 per month for one kid? It's not even really mentioned about Nicolette, what he was paying for her. And though, boatsmen and people can make good money when they're working offshore, sometimes it just depends. That's still a lot of money. That's a $600 payment per month. And I don't think that he would have been willing to pay for those extra years if he was really paying for 18 years with multiple other kids to support. And they knew that Gypsy did have problems because she did. And they also likely knew that Dede was scamming. But they just didn't care. And that is what it is. I think Rod attempts to somewhat own up to it, but I think they still try to soften the blow and push all of the blame onto Dede to make themselves not look as bad as what they were, saying that they actively tried to participate in Gypsy's life. It's very clear that they weren't. And that does happen, but you just gotta say what you gotta say. You can't continue to shift all this blame onto Dede as some monster that kept their relationship away from each other, and how he had hoped when she grew up she would, come find him and they'd have a relationship. But if she was, believing that she was 14 and so mentally delayed, why would that ever be a hope for you to have? Even in the various stories that he would tell about Gypsy when she was little, you know, he said that she started having sleep apnea and seizures as a newborn in about 3 months. He's given multiple stories and multiple variations of the illnesses, which I don't think he had any sort of clue about what was actually going on in Gypsy's health, which I don't know if that's a super common thing. I know a lot of people say that their husbands are completely different and they're totally involved with what's happening with their kids and sicknesses, but some guys are just really like that. Like, my dad doesn't even know my birthday. You know, like, some guys are just like that. They don't remember stuff like that, so it could be attributed to just not remembering correctly. But I think they just didn't want Gypsy to be a part of their life. And they've already pretty much admitted that this whole Lifetime series, it's financially motivated. They wanted to pay for the story, so why would they turn down the money? So exactly in that same sense, if Dede was getting donations and gifts and adventures for Gypsy, why would you turn it down? Someone's willing to pay it, why would you say anything against it? Right? But I'll probably be going through this information and digging a little bit more and getting into some more details about Rod and Kristy and their earlier years involved with Dede and Gypsy and how that whole relationship really works. But I want to know what you think. Do you think that they were totally aware of everything? Do you think they just didn't care enough and had no clue what was going on at all? Do you think that with the slight contact that they had, that they were just somewhat aware and they were cool with it because of, again, a financial motivation, even if it wasn't directly, I mean, I guess it would have been directly benefiting them if they didn't have to pay as much child support and Dede wouldn't have been so willing to have to go after them. But do you know anybody that has ever had a child with somebody else and then hidden it away? I know that actually happened to my own mom, I guess. Grandmother, so my mom's mom, like, hooked up with some random dude at a bar and later was like, oh, I'm pregnant. He was like, no, you're not by me anyway. I have a family. And so that, like, I guess affected my mom her entire life. I don't really know because she died when I was 3. But yeah, he had a whole entire other family and he was aware that she was, you know, pregnant at the time, but I still don't know who he is. I tried to find out like a few months back just for the sake of wanting to know and to maybe be like, oh, plot twist, just to bring some chaos. But not really, I'm just kidding, I wouldn't do that, but just to really find out who he was. And you know, it's just good to have information like that. But you know, in that case, in that instance, he was doing it because he had done something wrong and cheated on his wife and got another woman pregnant from a bar, which, you know, probably a good choice for him because my grandma was like literally crazy. Horrible example of a parent apparently. But yeah, I think that they absolutely just didn't even think about Gypsy except on occasion. And they didn't, I still don't feel that they fully believe that Dede was doing anything wrong to Gypsy. I think that they're at least aware enough to know that, yeah, Dede was a scammer and she stole and, you know, swindled for donations, but they know that she was not medically abused and they know that there was something wrong with Gypsy. And they just didn't care. So then you have to wonder, do they even care now? What is that relationship actually like and how long is it going to last? What future issues might arise? And how does it still affect Gypsy to this day? Especially with Gypsy being able to be on the internet, you know, she probably watches half of this stuff that content creators post, whether it be true or not, you know, for various theories. It has to irk her a little bit. That's why Gypsy in the first season of the Lifetime show asked Kristy, you know, point blank, did my dad call me I don't know if I can say that, but, and then if you go back and look through articles, there has been a report of somebody saying, oh, Rod would make fun of her and call her a freak show. So Gypsy does go through and she does search this stuff out and she seeks it. And I think Gypsy is definitely the type to let things eat at her or to eventually use it in order to manipulate or to throw them under the bus. So I don't know. They might be careful. I know that they probably got some dark secrets hidden away back there, but I want to know what you guys think down below. Again, I want to say thank you to all of my subscribers that have watched me and supported me, especially those that give me the super things. I really appreciate that. To the viewer that did that last time on my last video. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to hit the like button, and want to keep up with more things about this Gypsy Rose Blanchard case and the various details, because it's a very, very large thing. There's a lot of different stories and people and viewpoints and things like that it's just a very strange little thing. So I want to see more of those. Don't forget to subscribe. I will see you guys next time. Bye.